Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, Whale Coin Talk community. My name is Noah. I'm very excited to have the Near Protocol team on the stage today. Welcome, everyone. Before we get started talking about the ecosystem, would you mind giving us a quick background of yourself, your origin story, and how you found yourselves working in Web3?
Yeah, hey everyone, great to be here. My background is in machine learning and artificial intelligence. Been kind of working on that for about 10 years. We started Near AI uh, in 17, working actually on something that now is GitHub Autopilot is doing. And through kind of our journey there, we were doing a lot of data labeling, crowdsourcing, kind of engaging people around the world with small tasks and gigs, and just had a lot of operational challenges paying them. And so started looking at blockchain as a way to solve our own problem. How do we pay a lot of people kind of at scale automatically, using global payment network? And the answer was in 2018 that you cannot use any existing blockchain at the time to do that, and hence started Near Protocol.
Yeah, hi, Marik here. I lead the Near Foundation. My background, basically, I've been in technology for most of my career. I started in crypto end of 2015, early 2016, working for Circle. And then I actually went and led a neobank in a bank, let's call that going to the dark side. And I joined Near a little bit over a year ago to basically work with Ilya and the rest of the team, which I think are fantastic. And I saw that, Near in particular as a technology had a lot of the things that we were talking back when I first was in crypto between 2015 and 2019.
Hi everyone. Yeah, my name is David. I'm joining from the official Near Protocol account. I manage all of the social media here. In terms of your question, Noah, so I have like a PC version, a corporate version, then I have the truth. So I'm gonna direct it somewhere in the middle. Gosh, what year is it? 2023. So about 9 years ago, I was at a party at university, and somebody said, "Hey, you can buy weed online with Bitcoin." And I said, "That's not true." Anyway, it turns out it is. Did it once, sobered up, and fell in love with the culture and the ethos behind it. Then I started working professionally for since 2017 in it, and then somebody gave me a call from Nia, and quite frankly, I have never had an interview with somebody who I felt like was telling the absolute truth when it comes to their values, and they align so closely with me. This idea of openness and transparency and a free web for all, that I knew that it was the place to be. I joined a year and a half ago, and I'm proud every single day to call it my home.
Well, David, I think a lot of folks can relate to how you first got in, or at least how you first saw the true potential of this technology. And Marike, I would love to hear more about what you mean when you say Near kind of echoes the ethos of what people were talking about back in 2015, 2016. I'm sure we're going to get into that. And Ilya, eventually, I would love to hear more about how you're integrating your experiences with machine learning and AI into Near Protocol. But before we kind of jump into those nuts and bolts, let's start out by talking about Near Protocol and having you guys give us a high level overview of what it is, what it aims to solve, and then we can, like I mentioned, jump into the nuts and bolts of things.
Sure. So I think it's important to start with the core principle. The core principle and mission we have is we want to give the control and kind of creativity to people around the world. And the posted goal is how do we get to 1 billion people using Web3? And to do that, right, you need to make a lot of decisions kind of across the stack to enable that, right? So if we're talking about billion users, well, most users will not be technical. They will not know what, a hash of a public key is, and like they will not be able to manage their seed phrase. So you need to make this technology as accessible as possible, as simple to use as possible. It also means that to get to 1 billion users, right, you'll have a lot of applications, various use cases, kind of covering all aspects. And so we want to lower the bar for developers as well to have this creativity, right? And potentially even turn more people who are not developers into creators as well. And so kind of have tools that are potentially no code as well. So the second one obviously is like the core proposition here is, ownership, and with ownership comes all the security challenges. So it needs to be extremely secure. It needs to be able to withstand potentially attacks of, state actors, and is able to, continue working and protect the users even if they don't fully understand how things work. And finally, with billion users in mind, you need to have something that scales to this usage, right? To like all these people potentially even daily interacting with the blockchain and with the kind of the full stack. So simple, secure, scalable is kind of three values that we are focusing on. And so through that, building kind of at the core the developer platform that is near protocol, that is, a layer one blockchain that you can build with JavaScript and Rust. You can, and like actually other languages as well. A lot of developer tooling to make it really kind of easy for developers to build. There's some no-code solutions now. We have an extremely kind of flexible account model that allows to build very easy onboarding for users, as well as a kind of easy key management solutions, as well as, program your account, give people guest access, rotate keys, have like custom recovery. So like all kinds of options of functionality that people will want as we, kind of getting this more and more adopted. Security being a huge, focus for us as well, and we can go in more details on how that works. But designing for kind of like consensus that is fast and secure, designing for sharding that is kind of as synchronized as possible. And finally, on the scalability side, like how do we actually scale? Well, there's only one way to really scale, is to run more things in parallel. There's no other way. Like building bigger computers just doesn't work like it to scale for a billion users. And so you need to run things in parallel. How do you do that? Well, there's only like principally, from computer science, there's one way, like you parallelize things and you kind of synchronize them in different ways. And so that's what Near is. Near is a sharded blockchain that allows to kind of run things in parallel and scale under the hood without actually like users or developers needing to think about scalability, scale the blockchain capacity with the demand. And so that's a pretty unique offering compared to layer 2s, zones, parachains, etc., where you need to, as a user and developer, need to understand where you are, potentially even security implications of using a different zone, different layer 2s, like what's the time between them and stuff like this. On Near, all of that is kind of hidden behind the kind of the blockchain layer, and all of the scalability happens underneath while still providing this idea of how do we add more capacity to the network as more demand is coming.
Great. So lots to unpack there, and I think I'm going to go backwards. You guys are approaching, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are approaching the blockchain trilemma by focusing on security and scalability. So what does that mean for the decentralization of the network? And then we can kind of go into the Near delegated proof of stake consensus mechanism and how that works.
For sure, yeah. So definitely security and scalability is extremely important. Decentralization here is, we think of it as quote unquote progressive decentralization, meaning the more usage we get, the more demand we have, the more validators we need, the more machines we need to process this. But they will not be able to process the whole blockchain at once all the time, right? Like again, think of a billion users interacting with the blockchain. There's no single computer in the world that will be able to receive the traffic of that whole system, right? So you need to partition this, and then then you focus on security. How do you secure this such that things are replicated, fault tolerant? If nodes are not able to do anything malicious, or if they do, they get punished extremely, and network recovers from that. And so that's kind of how we view it. So as an example, we went from 100 validators that we had in 2021, 2022 to we launched a chunk-only producers in September 2022. And so that increased number of slots from 100 to 300. And so as we adding more shards to the network with more demand needed, more slots will be available. For example, the team wants to launch a 100 shard network to test everything at scale, and that will require 5,000 validator slots, right? So kind of as more demand, as more network is needed, then you'll get more validators actually participating versus having just, tens of thousands of validators, which all, like a lot of them are the same entities, but then they're actually doing all the same work and not providing extra benefits to the network.
Okay, got it. So the DPoS consensus mechanism, it basically is set up in a way where as demand and users increase, the number of validators increase. And you gave that example of the 100 validators to 300 over the course of a few years. So what are the requirements for setting up a validator?
It's a reasonable machine. I can link to the specific specs. And then right now, the minimum stake is 20,000 lira.
Sorry, you broke up. And yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. You don't need to go into too much detail, but what I'm trying to understand is how easy is it for the average person to set up a validator and participate in consensus? So what was the minimum amount of NIR?
20,000 NIR.
Got it. Okay. And you said you can find like the specific hardware and software requirements on the website.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Just NIR validator requirements, and enter that in Google first link, and there's like instructions how to run it.
And can you describe the Nightshade sharding mechanism, how it works, and how it differs from sharding that Ethereum has envisioned in the future?
Well, sharding that Ethereum envisioned in the future is right now still undetermined, and so it's hard to compare. But kind of conceptually, what NIR is focused on, right, is kind of the scalability that goes under the hood. And so because of that, the focus being how do we scale kind of while it still looks like a one chain to all the like everybody who uses it from outside. And so because of this, you can think of Nightshade. What Nightshade is doing is scaling blocks. So instead of sharding, like having lots of different chains and then having some way to like link them, that's what, if you think of zones or parachains or even layer twos on Ethereum, like that's what they do. They kind of spin up separate independent environments, and then they're trying to tie them together with some kind of settlement mechanism or cross-chain validation. What NIR does is actually scales blocks, and so you have sharded blocks, and you can have more and more space in the block. It also shards state, of course, to match the like what's processed in different shards of the block. And so what this allows to do is to have synchronization on every block level. So what this means is that every second, NIR block time is 1 second, you have a full synchronization of the network between all shards, and all the kind of cross shard messaging happens at that time. And so it's actually embedded directly into consensus that as let's say you executed a transaction in shard 1, the message is routed to a shard 2 in the next block, and that's required by consensus. And so that has a very kind of big benefits for developers when they're building applications like this. Like none of these guarantees exist in IBC or layer 2s or any other kind of cross chain communication protocols that are people building. And so this allows to kind of not really think about sharding from a developer perspective, but also allows us kind of the protocol itself to move around applications. Because let's say some application became really popular and it has a lot of usage, like Aurora, for example, back in last year, and there was a governance decision to actually pull it out into a separate shard. And so this actually gave Aurora a full shard of capacity, as if they ran their own application chain, but it was done like completely invisible to the user. It was like they didn't need to run validators. They didn't need to change any of their infrastructure. It just like, governance, validators approved it. Boom, Aurora is running now in a separate shard and has kind of dedicated capacity there. And so things like that, like, again, nothing changed for user, nothing changed for developers. Like allows like Nightshade to be both very scalable, but also very kind of simple to use for anyone who's interacting with it.
How does it compare to Avalanche's subnet model? What are some advantages?
Well, again, I mean, the advantages are, as I mentioned, like subnets have the same problem. They're like breaking down the kind of composability of the network, right? You have separate networks that now you need to figure out how to tie together. They also have, I mean, not the security model of like subsets of validators, like, can be similar, but then as far as I understand, there's no specific guarantees on that, like what's a subset of validators and like how is that rotated. But I don't know if I have full information on that. But again, the main perspective on all of this is just like all of these approaches are breaking down the composability of the for both users and developers. And now, like as a user of a subnet, you need to think about like, okay, well, so how many actually validators running this? Like, what's the stake? How do I move things around? What's the settlement time? And that is like, something that users should not be thinking about.
And just to sum up this last thought, when you break down the composability of a network, what happens? Why is that not good?
Well, like a multitude of things, right? First of all, the simplest thing is like integrations, right? Now, if we're talking about like any other external integration, like custody or like accounting, taxation, whatever that is, like they need to now build a new support for a new sub network, right, or zone or whatever, and like do accounting separately. You have the cross like subnet, cross zone, cross layer 2 messaging, right, that now is asynchronous, but there's no guarantees around delivery. And so now when you're building an application, you need to have like that maybe spans multiple of these parallel environments. Now you as a developer need to really think what you're doing because you may get into really bad states. And then for a user, right, like the composability of this means like you put money in something, for example, on Arbitrum, and you see something interesting on optimism, like, that's not a very straightforward move from one to another. Like now, yes, there's some bridges for tokens now, but like that's just tokens, right? You cannot, like, there's no generic message passing that's like have good guarantees. And so you cannot like communicate that you have value, for example, in Aave on Arbitrum to do something in Optimism, as an example, right? Or you have an NFT that you want to play a game in Optimism with and stuff like this. And so it just breaks down kind of the core value prop that we're trying to build here.
Got it. Understood. And with that said, let's talk a bit about the and I feel like you've been highlighting the near virtual machine, but can you sum up, what the near VM is, how it's different from Ethereum, outside of what you've already listed, and then we can talk about Aurora. I'm really curious to learn more about that.
Yeah, so we kind of from the start wanted to focus on easier onboarding for developers, right? And so we picked WebAssembly at the core as a technology that is now kind of broadly available and supported, right? It runs in every browser in the world, right? It's supported by big companies and small companies alike. There's kind of a whole movement of WebAssembly on Edge as well. So it's a technology that is kind of taking the world one step at a time. And so we're supporting that. That also means that all the work that's done by kind of broader WebAssembly ecosystem of improvements of compilers, speed, everything is benefiting Near, and we're also contributing back to that as well. And so through that, obviously because we are sharded, that means that every contract is asynchronous, and so it has its own pros and cons. The pro is that we can parallelize things and move things around. The con is you don't have as much like direct kind of atomic transactions as you would have in Ethereum, like in EVM. But then you have like kind of things where you can try catch and do other things, or like do MapReduce style, like kind of span out the multiple calls and then see how if they succeed or not, and do something based on that. So there's just like different type of programming that you can do, which actually more similar to programming that people in traditional like web services, including finance, are doing. Like it's all based on microservices, and so near smart contracts are actually closer to a microservice with a database, with a key value database that they can store data in. And then finally, the final part is access keys and kind of account model that allows to kind of very flexibly, turn account into a contract, like contract into a DAO, upgrade DAOs, do a lot of things like, guest keys. Like there's a project called KeyPalm that creates a key that's pre-programmed for a set of actions that you can share with people to, do things and then convert their actions into a proper account later. So like high level, a lot of flexibility, a lot of programmability that doesn't exist in other blockchains, but at the same time, kind of really focusing on simplicity. So, things like named accounts, like Ilya.near is my account, or root.near is my account, and then you can like add keys, permissions, set up recovery, do all those things, and turn that account into a contract and make it even more programmable. And we're actually working on even next level extension. We call them account extensions, to make accounts even more programmable and kind of composable. So, generally, like what is it we can enable through this model, and we continue innovating there. So yeah, like for those who coming from EVM, it's account abstractions is embedded, ability to write into any programming languages. And so talking about Aurora is actually just an EVM code, right? So EVM, like not from Guess, but like from Parity in Rust originally, and now Sputnik VM, just compile to WebAssembly and run. So we're running like another blockchain as a smart contract. And you can do that with other blockchains as well. Like that's how powerful WebAssembly is. You can literally take existing code that runs another blockchain and run it inside Near as a smart contract. And that's what Aurora is. And it provides kind of this virtual level of support for Ethereum smart contracts on Near.
Wow. So you can technically fork or copy a blockchain and it would exist on Near as a smart contract?
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, I'm encouraging anyone, by the way, to fork Bitcoin and put it on Near. It will be a proof of stake Bitcoin. You can even make it ultrasound and start burning these forked Bitcoins.
I'm totally sure at this point someone must have done that. No, how heavy of a lift is that?
It's not that heavy. It's just somebody needs to build that, right?
Okay, so really, before we kind of dive into some questions about Aurora, the Near VM seems to echo the ethos that you had talked about earlier. The way to onboard 1 billion people, and I'm going to just paraphrase it in my own words, is to help them interface with Web3 without realizing they're interfacing with Web3. So not so technical, not all these steps to either enter a liquidity pool, for example, or store an asset or interface with a dApp. And, one of the things I was curious about is, because you said you guys, this is broadly available and supported by big and small companies alike. Is there like a step-by-step way for someone to set up a Near account, or rather a Near wallet, and also tell us about the recovery process, right? The accounts are programmable, recoverable. How easy it is to, how easy is it, to make sure, or rather to make an account recoverable? Because in many cases, people lose their keys, end up losing a lot of money. So what is your solution to that problem?
Yeah, so setting up account is pretty easy. There's wallet.near.org, but also there's Here Wallet and Meteor Wallet that people can try. It's pretty straightforward. I think Here Wallet is probably a good option for new users right now. And there's like you pretty much enter the username you want there, and it registers an account. And so then you have like, you can think of the recovery more of a device management process, right? Where you authorize different devices or different recovery methods for your account. And this is done because Near has not one key mapping to your account, but actually lots of different keys, and you can add and remove them kind of on based on how you want it. And so Near Wallet, for example, supports email recovery. I think there was at least SMS recovery before, but sadly SMS is like not secure, and so people been kind of concerned about that. There's obviously a hardware wallet, which again you can set up later. So the big benefit here is that you can start your account when you don't have any money. That's not very secure, and then later when you do, hey, actually I want to switch to a ledger, for example, and that's like a one click to do that in the wallet. And what it does, it actually gets a key from Ledger, right? The key that has not been used before, and adds it to your account and removes potentially the key that was less secure. And so through that, you can rotate keys in a way, which, for example, when LastPass hack was announced, like Near was the only platform where you can just like go, and if you had less keys in LastPass, you can just rotate your keys and set up new keys and remove the old keys that potentially compromised. You don't need to like drain your wallet and hope you don't have any vesting or like royalties assigned to that account. Like that's only on Near is possible. And then people are setting up more and more recovery methods. So it can be like a MPC style. It can be a trusted third party that can only recover your account with a delay. It can be social recovery. So there's some work being done on kind of you designate some of your email like friends by email, and they can actually send an email. Like if multiple of them send an email, they'll recover your account, and they may not even know that they are designated until you ask them. So stuff like this, just kind of lots of different options, because like the platform is open and enables very custom programmable options. You can also turn your account into a DAO or a multi-sig like later very easily, and then you control it through multiple other accounts approving different transactions.
Okay, wow. So versatility of what you can do with your account, and just to reiterate an example, or rather to echo an example back to you, I can see this being incredibly useful if someone if someone thinks that their private key might have been compromised, or let's say that they started an account, as you said, and the account all of a sudden gets whitelisted for a bunch of different projects or gets qualified for airdrops, and now the person's like, oh well, I didn't think this was going to be an account that I would hold forever. I store my private keys in my email. They can seamlessly choose to switch over to a ledger, or seamlessly choose to generate a new private key that would secure their account and basically negate the old private key. I think that the use cases for this is tremendous. And I also think that being able to turn a single signature account to a multi-sig account is really incredible as well. Let's say like you start a business and you bring on business partners, and eventually you want to spread it across 3 people because, I don't know, something happens to you, then the reserve or the treasury goes with you. Am I right in kind of echoing some of the use cases that I'm echoing here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think one actually like a very specific case. So a friend of mine had his machine hacked, and so every single crypto except Near were stolen. But Near, he had 2FA set up, which 2FA is like a basic like a 2 out of 3 multi-sig that was deployed on his account, and it was like his two of his keys and one on the server. And so the only kind of account that was not like drained was the Near account because of this. So that's like just a simple example of practical security that has already been running on Near since launch.
That's
But yeah,
awesome.
like turn like a company account into a DAO very easily and kind of start managing it, and like from a perspective of every single other interaction, it's exactly the same.
Yeah, that's so cool. And you mentioned earlier that the Near SDKs are meant to help developers build as seamlessly and as efficiently as possible. But you also mentioned that you have tools that are no code and that can help non-developers build as well. Are those live? Are those available for people to use, or are they something that's still in the works? And what do those look like? Just give us a few examples.
Yeah, I mean, there's few things like Zapier style that's already live, and then there's more things are in progress to kind of really enable interesting kind of not just backend but also front end ways of composing things. But I can link some of the no code stuff in the Twitter later in the Twitter thread.
Cool. Rust and JavaScript are the main programming languages. Are there other programming languages that developers can choose to build when it comes to the Near VM?
I mean, so it's WebAssembly. So anything that compiles to WebAssembly, which I think there's like 50 different compilers that exist. Now, like Rust and JavaScript is where we have like, dedicated work on the SDKs and kind of all the tooling. But, there's Zig and a few other like more kind of, I would say like less popular languages that people build integrations. I think people have tried Python. I think people have tried Go. You can definitely do C++. And I do know from my Twitter that people are using ChatGPT to directly generate WebAssembly as well. So language to code is also now is possible.
Wow, that's incredible. Really quick, wanted to talk about the Aurora EVM compatible chain, or I guess in this case, it's a smart contract that was deployed. Can you tell us a bit more about the benefits of having that, like what it's meant for user adoption? Because a lot of people are kind of comfy on EVM compatible chains and they don't really want to venture out too much. Have you guys seen a rise in user base and TVL ever since you launched it?
Yeah, exactly. So the benefit being that kind of there's two-sided market that exists on EVM chains, and that is people who are familiar with the kind of the experience of using it, and the other side is the source code of existing protocols like Aave, Uniswap, Curve, etc., which has been battle tested with billions of dollars, and that is really hard to replicate. Like this kind of battle tested by billions of dollars source code. And so what Aurora really enabled to do is to have these applications to be launched on Near really easily, right? I think it literally takes a minute to launch an existing application on Aurora right now. You just like switch the RPC endpoint and say truffle deploy. And so from this perspective, like we have Curve launched, we have Aave forks, we have obviously like Uniswap v2 forks and like a bunch of other interesting stuff. And so with that, there was a bunch of people who indeed were more familiar, and they were like easily bridging to Aurora to interact with that kind of through their existing experience of MetaMask and everything. And obviously, like some of the other integrations are just easier to do with that. Like Covalent is supporting Aurora and others, versus for Near, it's a heavier lift for them. So definitely that's been kind of an avenue for growth of like specifically covering existing Web3 users, and some new users, but mostly not. And then on Near, what we see is mostly new users coming in who are not familiar with Web3, for whom this kind of more flexible account model that like makes more sense, it's more straightforward, and they have email recovery, they have like all the normal ways to interact with things, and there is kind of a wider variety of applications that is used on Near outside of Aurora. So kind of there's like this dichotomy that being formed, although any application on Near can actually interact with Aurora, and Aurora has launched already also support for calling out into Near easily as well. So like Ref Finance, for example, right now aggregates across both Near pools and Aurora pools in one transaction.
I'm not going to ask you to go into how that works because I'm not a developer, so most of it would probably go over my head. I do love the angle that you guys took with Aurora, and I love how easy it is for popular DeFi apps like Aave and Curve to potentially expand Aurora. Have you guys talked to the developers and the leadership at these protocols? And the reason I ask is, as many people might already know, oftentimes a new EVM compatible chain will have Aave and Curve expand over. They launch liquidity incentive programs, and that's something that gets new users enticed to come over, and along with their liquidity, they park their liquidity there, and that also gets them exposure to the ecosystem. They are more incentivized to learn about the ecosystem, and they're more incentivized to stay. We saw it with AVAX, we saw it with Polygon, we saw it with Phantom, we're seeing it with Arbitrum and Optimism. So curious to know, I guess, two-part question. Are you talking to those juggernauts? And do you guys have any liquidity incentive programs in place?
So, I mean, Curve already launched, I don't remember when, a while ago. And then there's forks of Aave that have been pretty successful at some point. I think one of them was over $1 billion in TVL, or at least like 500 million for sure. So, like, generally speaking, yes, that kind of all have happened. But obviously right now, I think the market has moved on from that strategy, broadly speaking, and really focuses across, I think, all teams is on value generation and creating true kind of economic value that is lasting. And so I think that kind of obviously always been focused for us. We never tried to play any like short-term games, but I think it's true now for the broader space that, like, at this point we need to show like clear use cases that create value kind of outside of crypto, not just inside. And so I think it's really important to build like for that, with that in mind, like what is the new users, what is their ability to interact and either earn kind of through like productive work, or ability to create the kind of liquidity that then moves into real world as well to participate in the economy there. And so I think that's, like, at least from my perspective, a lot of focus on that is like truly engaging experiences, truly engaging ways for people to participate, and then ways to actually do productive work. And then if we talk about liquidity side, make sure that this liquidity is able to participate in real world, and real world economy can come in on chain, because blockchain is a more effective way to do finance either way. And so like all of the traditional finance should move their rails to the blockchain as well.
Mm-hmm. Rainbow Bridge. How many different ecosystems does Rainbow Bridge? God, I can't speak. Sorry, guys. How many different ecosystems does Rainbow Bridge allow folks to send funds back and forth to and from? And what's the security like? We've seen a lot of bridge exploits, and would love to know what you guys are doing to make sure that doesn't happen with Rainbow.
Yeah, good question. So Rainbow Bridge actually only connects to Ethereum. So Rainbow Bridge was very kind of in a way tailor-made to work with proof of work Ethereum chain to be fully kind of secure through a like line verification. And so nobody have done that. I mean, obviously this is not needed anymore with proof of stake switch, but back then Rainbow Bridge was the only light client bridge to Ethereum proof of work. And this is like very similar in spirit to IBC on the security model, but somewhat different design to make it a little bit more composable and customizable. And so the like other chains right now, there's Wormhole, multi-chain, and a few other bridges that connect kind of with other chains, and people are starting to use them. And so Rainbow, in a way, it was like a bootstrapping mechanism almost in many ways. And obviously, because Ethereum still is the biggest economy, it makes sense to continue to maintain that. On security side, so again, it's a light client bridge, meaning that it's kind of minimum of either security, right? Of the blockchains, not it's not some kind of like external multisig or set of guardians, but actually like real validators of the blockchain that need to collude and maliciously sign blocks, and they will get slashed for doing that on their source chain as well. So that's, as secure as we can get at this point. And there's like more work being done on zero knowledge proof compression as stuff in the ecosystem. And then on top of it, like there's the operational security. So there's a team, kind of any launch, everything is obviously audited. And also there's they have a really long checklist, including verifying that compiler hasn't been targeted with malicious intent, because the reality is if you do want to attack any of these things, the easiest way is to actually do a supply chain attack and kind of introduce a vulnerability somewhere where people don't actually usually look.
And I feel like we've already touched on the Octopus network, if I'm not mistaken. Is there anything that we need to expand upon with respect to that?
I mean, so Octopus Network is you can think of it as actually a way to run parachains that are connected to Near directly. And so you can spin up like Substrate and in the future Cosmos SDKs, but they are interlinked with Near. There's, you can reuse all of the bridging and other tech on this. And so they just allowed a really easy way to bootstrap such a network. You don't need to go through auction. You don't need to go through kind of complex like gaining validators process. You just deposit your WebAssembly runtime and then kind of define how much you're willing to pay in your token, and then validators are picking this up and starting to run it.
Got it. So a lot of layer ones are currently general purpose, but as more come in, you need to start differentiating yourselves. And so I'm curious to know what some sectors are where Near is beginning to work on standing out. So is it DeFi? Is it gaming? Is it NFTs? Or is it something else? I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, so for us, it was always kind of focus on things that need users, right? And so the specifically and in turn things that do have users that need blockchain. And I think like one of the things we have been focused a lot is kind of taking existing really successful use cases that are centralized in some form and bringing them to blockchain. And so I think the most standout example is Sweatcoin. It's a move to earn. They have 120 million installs on their app. They were running completely centralized. They had actually a profitable business from that, just like through loyalty points and reselling that to advertisers. And they tried to use pretty much a bunch of blockchains that all claim the scalability, and none of them were able to like prove that they can handle this load that Sweatcoin is creating. Near can, and so they end up launching. They have like somewhere between 500 to 1 million monthly active users pretty much on Near right now, and kind of continue scaling through that, right? So that's a really good example of like existing large user base want to use blockchain, like we are the ones who are actually delivering on a scale and be able to like easy onboard these users without them breaking their head on what the hell is crypto, and through that allowing them to really like introduce this massive user base to the kind of Web3. There's like few other examples in similar way, like gaming, Play Ember, done that, bringing like their existing, like I think they have like 4-5 million users that they're bringing in stages to blockchain as well. Another example is Orderly, which is taking existing centralized exchange and creating layer of settlement and custody on chain, so you don't get problems like FTX had, because everything's on chain and accounted for, but you still have exactly the same kind of performance for order book, because order book is still centralized. And so through that, you actually get like huge benefits, because it's actually better product than centralized exchange and decentralized exchanges as they are right now. And like it's bringing existing business that we know is successful, like exchanges are extremely successful businesses when run properly. to blockchain, and actually using blockchain for crypto exchange, which usually is not done. So these are examples of how do we get existing business that really works, that can gain usage, and bring it, put part of it to use blockchain in productive ways that increases retention, increases transparency, increases programmability, increases composability. But from a sector perspective, it's true about every single sector.
Is there a specific sector that is currently exciting you most when it comes to NEAR and what's being built?
Well, I think of this as I think always about composability. For me, blockchain is this. It's about balance of this low switch cost and composability. And when we talk about composability, what I'm excited about is that you can have a finance on one side, gaming on the other side, social on third side, and all of this is actually linked together and working together. And that's why we have some interesting things in social that are happening, which then already powering things in, wallets starting to adopt the social profiles that you use when you do payments, for example, right? I'm sure gaming will start adopting it as well. I can see gaming starting to use, social stuff. We've seen finance using in gaming as well. And so just the composability of all these components is where I think really exciting things are happening.
You mentioned at the beginning of the space, and I said I was going to bring this up, machine learning and AI is something that you were versed in. What are some ways that you see these, specifically AI and both machine learning and AI, integrating or becoming a part of NEAR's growth and prosperity?
Yeah, so there's a few things that have been already happening. So the major one is called NEAR Crowd. So this is the kind of our origin is in data labeling, right? And so there's been a data labeling platform run on NEAR for past about 2 years, kind of proving out that this is possible and indeed a very effective model of doing this. And it's potentially a competitive product to Web2 data labeling platforms that have billion-dollar valuations. And so I think that, generally speaking, if we talk about AI, the core value right now is in data, because the models are they're public. They're there's a PDF, there's source code usually released as well. It's pretty easily reproducible. The compute is, although hard to get, but it is a commodity, right? If you do have $10 million plus, you can get enough compute to train GPT-3. Maybe for GPT-4 you need 100 million. But it's still a commodity, right? It's not a kind of a unique value. And so the unique value is in data, is in fine tuning for specific use cases. And so that's what blockchain is already proven to be really effective, is at that. And then going beyond that, there will be more and more I just saw actually a paper around a more kind of swarm-like training models instead of on a dedicated cluster. And so I think more and more a more decentralized approaches for using compute, as well as a more decentralized approaches to kind of do research, will be becoming important. And so using blockchain almost for coordinating all this and funding all this will become a way that I think blockchain will drive it. And then the other side of this is AI will start breaking a bunch of stuff in our social layer, like law, politics, bureaucracy. And so we need blockchain actually to just solve those problems. We cannot rely on, a paper submitted PDFs for, any legal work or whatever, because they all can be manufactured by AI extremely efficiently at at really high throughput. So we will need to start creating a more authenticated trails, identity management that uses cryptography and is rooted in a blockchain to actually identify what is real and what is not.
We've done a couple Socratic style panels on Chat GPT and AI, and I would love to do one where you come on in the future. So I'll shoot you a DM. I think it's really interesting, and I don't want to go too far off on a tangent, but I'm very curious to learn more about how, and I can probably Google this, but learn more about how it's going to break stuff like law, politics, and just change the way that humans interface with the world. So getting back on track, wanted to ask about the Near community. I know that in my research might be outdated, but I know that the Medium posts are spearheaded by the Near community. But what other role does the community play in the protocol?
I'll let Marie can.
Yeah, I was going to say, David, do you want? Yeah, David, do you want to take that? Okay, maybe not. I'll jump in. So the role of the foundation to also help put into context what we do for the community. So the role of the foundation is to actually help grow and basically kickstart off the community so that it can actually be sustainable and engaged. And so we have different communication channels. You mentioned Medium, which actually we do have a community team that is looking after that. But more importantly, we actually leverage quite a lot Twitter. We've seen a lot of growth actually on that Twitter channel. We do also have groups that are engaging on Discord, maybe for more like specific angles. And more generally speaking, the way we think actually about communities, how can we also help continuously get more and more in the hands of the community decision power, but also like funding allocation. And so, for example, on that front, we have an initiative that's called the Near Digital Collective that is spearheading how to enable funding and how to actually enable that through different DAOs that are community-led. But I think David now is back, and so I don't know, David, if you want to add anything on community.
Yeah. Absolutely. It was working perfectly the entire time until the community question came around. So it's sod's law. Noah, I know you mentioned Medium, but things have popped up across the entire community. And if you head to wiki.near.org/growth, you'll see some of the incredible initiatives that community members have driven and have created. And I almost liken it to, look, we're about to approach spring here in the UK, and when you take a walk outside your door every day, you'll start to see bulbs of daffodils to begin to emerge from the ground. And then one day you walk out and it's just a field of daffodils everywhere. And you're like, how the hell did that happen? So right now there's, 10, 20, 30 incredible projects, those daffodils that are popping up that serve system, assist projects with promoting theirs, do user research, user testing, everything. And I'm sure that in 6 months' time, I'm going to step out my metaphorical door at work and there's going to be 1,000 more, because that's the pace that we're growing at. And I think the value that these community members are adding, frankly, without them, there would be no near ecosystem.
Yeah, I bet. And would love to learn more about who gets to write the Medium articles, how the community decides which articles are okay for publishing and which ones are probably not so good. Is there like a governance team, or is there like a leadership team within the community? How's that decided?
Great question. Actually, so specifically Medium, that's a community group that is independent and that takes that on to write that. There's another initiative in the community that's called Near Week. And Near Week, for example, has a DAO where you can submit news or things that should be written about or should be amplified. So that's, for example, one way that we see, more news being like spread across the ecosystem, or actually spearheaded, or even like voted upon. But for example, the Medium channel on its own is actually owned by a group that is within the community. I would say, that's probably one of the specificities of Near. And I know we talked about decentralization from a validator perspective, but there is also at the heart and the start of when Near was set up, there was an intention and a commitment to have decentralization also across like who gets to actually amplify what message and to talk about what, and so on and so forth. And so, for example, Medium in particular is one of those channels which is already fully owned by members of the community, and therefore they manage what they want to write on that channel.
I would just like to highlight really really, really quickly. I know we spoke a lot about decentralization today. Ilya and Marika both touched on it. Excellent points. But it's convenient that you booked our spaces for today, because today we just hit 200 active validators for the first time ever. And I'm confident that in the not so distant future, we'll see 2,000, 20,000, hell, 200,000.
I love it. Well, big congratulations. And if people in the audience are enjoying this, enjoying the speakers, go give them a follow, give the Near Protocol account a follow. And also, if you like the content we put out here at Whalecoin Talk, we would all appreciate a follow up on stage as well. Moving on to the next question, I wanted to just briefly touch on the Near Foundation's function and role in the Near ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, broadly speaking, our mission is actually to help kickstart off and help the ecosystem grow to become sustainable and self-sustainable. And so we have 3 mandates. One is actually how can we help raise awareness of Near protocol, the Near technology, and what you can do on Near. Our second mandate is actually to help support and kickstart what the ecosystem needs. And so the best way to think about that is to make sure that the roads are built and that the infrastructure is in place so that builders can build and users can actually find what they need. And then the third pillar is actually advocacy for governance, decentralization, but also advocacy in particular for regulation, because we are now, in a Web3 crypto context, also in a time and space where regulators are ramping up what they know. They're also ramping up what they think should be done, actually, and across the world, those are totally different things. So having a voice and having a point of view on that is also one of the mandates. So that's what we do: raise awareness, help support the ecosystem, and then do advocacy for decentralized governance and regulation.
Are governance decisions made strictly based on how many tokens an entity holds?
No, it's not. So there's different models, and actually, so the Near Digital Collective, which is the group I mentioned before, is right now actually setting up, what is the constitution for the Near ecosystem, what would be the voting mechanism. I'll give a concrete example. Right now, we have a couple of DAOs that are themselves allocating funding to initiatives. So, for example, we have a marketing DAO that is looking at, what are the marketing initiatives that community members want to actually take on. Then the DAO actually reviews those activities and then vote upon those activities, but without needing to have a certain amount of tokens. But it's more like reviewing as you would review, for example, a grant application or something like that, and then it's voted upon. If it passes through, then it gets funding, and if it gets funding, then it needs to actually deliver. So those are at the moment the type of mechanism that we see. Equally, we also have a dev DAO that is also leveraging some of the same mechanisms. So we're more aiming at the moment on transparency and openness of what the community wants to build, and then self-governance within that to actually decide what gets funded. There's definitely ideas on should it be quadratic decision making, or should it be on number of tokens, but I would say it's still something that we are looking at and don't have yet concrete examples on.
Yeah, no, I love that point of departure. And Marika, I'm sure you are probably the one to ask this. So would love to learn more about the Near funding resources. So ecosystem grants, accelerators and incubators, community-led DAOs, and regional hubs.
Yeah, great question. So look, so one thing actually, we also evolve how we do funding for the community, given depending on so market conditions. So at a high level, we do have a very large network of backers and people who actually actively invest in projects that are being built on Near. And to give you an idea of figures, in 2022 alone, there was 350 million that was committed to buy external capital to projects that are building on Near, which is quite a very large amount of funding. And so that's without taking into account even what the foundation invested in the Near ecosystem. So 350 million of external capital brought on to projects that are being built on there. So one venue is actually like relying on, what we call ecosystem funds or venture capital that actually are interested on building on there. Another venue, as you mentioned and alluded to, is more the community grassroots DAO that exists. And so at the moment, you have, for example, a marketing DAO. We are in process of, like, in the next couple of days, relaunching a DAO that's more focused on creatives, so things that tune in particular to NFT. There is the Dev DAO. And as part of this NDC initiative that I mentioned, there might be, other DAOs such as startup DAOs or things along those lines. So grassroots community funding. And then one other thing that we've seen, and that's the shift that we have operated between 2022 and actually 2023. In 2022, we did actually quite a lot of grant seeding, but we're actually shifting that into much more an accelerator model, because what we see is that very often what projects and founders and developers need, yes, it can be first like a couple of tokens or near or a little bit of funding to help, but very often it's also like actually helping with active resources or actually active accelerator program. So that's also something at the moment, it's in very MVP. We are actually sponsoring and going to East Denver, and we'll have demo there of what the accelerator in itself look like. And the last part you mentioned is more geographic and actually regional hubs. So the way we think about actually how to get to the billion users that Ilya mentioned is, well, it's kind of pointless if it's all done under one roof culture and actually with one similar and just speaking English, because quite frankly, English is still quite a privileged language in a lot of places around the world. And so we do have a lot of like grassroots local communities around the world, and some of them are doing much more like meetup and community translation of material and community activation, but then others also have their own funds, and they can also help like connect through networks that are locally placed. So all in all, a lot. And I'm sure you guys are hearing like, okay, there's a lot of different things there, like how do I keep track of everything and what's going on here. The resource I would send people to is near.org. There's actually a page for funding options, and it's something that we continuously evolve on a day-to-day and month-to-month basis.
How many hubs currently exist? Is there a map or something where people can see, oh, there's a near hub near me, I can go, no pun intended, I can go and meet up with folks in the community?
Yeah, great question. So yes, so there is structured hubs. I think it's something like, and what I call structured is probably hubs that are a bit, have maybe a bit more funding and have like a larger team. I think it's something like 12, and it goes from Vietnam to actually the Balkans to a hub that is actually called Banyan that has a footprint more in the US, an India hub. We also have a Korea hub and so on and so forth. And then we have like a ton of local communities that are active around the world and that on their own take it up to actually translate things and to organize local meetup or events. So I would say the best place, and again, near.org has a mapping of that, probably a mapping more of the structured ones. But then if you speak a local language, chances are there's probably a Twitter account that is in that local language, and therefore that can help guide you through local resources.
And like this last question on the hubs, if someone is in an area of the world where there isn't a hub or there isn't a hub close by, what and I'm sure this is in the resources that you're quoting here, but what would be the process in starting a hub? Do you have to get approved by a certain governance, or rather a certain council? I would love to hear the details.
Yeah, no, great question. So at the moment, anyway, so look, a lot of the principles are actually also a bit like the protocol is, right, which is permissionless. So in a way, you don't need to ask permission for starting to kick off an activities around near. However, if you want funding for supporting, for example, local events, then there is actually a path to do that. And I think we should share the resources on that, because then that's where also we can say, well, rather than reinventing the wheel, if you're planning to do a meetup, those are interesting resources. And if you want to get a bit of funding for, I don't know, like, gear and swags and content, there is actually a way where you can apply for getting a small grant to actually start doing your event. But what we've seen is, and some of our most successful communities often don't rely on any funding and just start from scratch. And I think, David, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are looking to spin up an event that's focused on or around NEAR, or a project that's building on NEAR, you can head to near.org/events. It has all the information there. It's got a wonderful events calendar from things that are happening from the foundation side and the community side of things. And if you scroll down, you will see a little button that says apply for event funding. We want to see an absolute global community which is thriving every single day, and we're well on our way to that. But if you're in a region or an area that perhaps hasn't got quite the same formal NEAR community than a lot of the world does, then by all means head to that website, near.org/events.
And this is a question to all of you. NEAR obviously has a bright future. You have a lot of things going for you on the protocol level, on the technical level, on the community level, on the ecosystem level. What would you say are some key challenges that are currently facing the NEAR protocol?
Well, Ilya, you go.
Well, I think one kind of global challenge for the whole Web3 right now has been around just like getting users to stick around, right? I think there was a lot of new people came into the space in 2021 and beginning of 2022, but it has been like, people tried things out. They kind of, bought maybe an NFT or some tokens. They saw the value plummet and they kind of got disappointed and, left. And so generally speaking, at least like for me and some of the work I'm doing with some teams is like, what is the engagement we can build that it spans beyond just like pure financial transactions, that people can start interacting. Because if we don't have that, like people will just come and kind of, depending on the market, will leave, right? Which keeps happening, I think, across, Bitcoin over every cycle. Versus people actually stay around and do things and build and kind of build networks and communities. And so I think that's a core, I would say, challenge for the whole Web3 that we're trying to address. I think kind of we continue innovating on the onboarding. We still think it's still hard, right? And so like one of the meta transactions on the technical side to allow applications to pay for user fees, transaction fees, and kind of really simplify the even further the onboarding of the new users. And I think the final part is, if we're talking about finance, kind of this connectivity to the real world is still a challenge. And so like, how do we make it such that traditional finance is more like interacting with crypto? Because like, again, as I said, I do think the blockchain, the DeFi, they are providing a more like literally operationally efficient platform, but people are still skeptical of it. And so like, how do we bridge that gap to truly kind of make real world assets on chain, make it kind of economy working with that, and be productive economy as well, not just kind of moving money between the same things and over leveraging.
Yeah, and maybe to add different points on that, not that we have many challenges, but maybe more meta points that we're seeing. So overall, the reputation of Web3 and crypto in general, I think has taken a hit in 2022. It's great to see that we seem to be hitting back and getting back to spring, so that has actually a lot of hope for 2023. But I think that is something that keeps me awake at night. I think the other thing is this tribalism around technology. My layer one is better than your layer one, and if you think of actually where things are heading up, it's actually much more commoditization. And I mean, you've heard all the amazing things, and back to when we started, that's actually why I joined, because I thought the way NEAR protocol and the technology has been thought through is just phenomenal, and the amount of creativity that you can do on that is incredible. Nevertheless, what we're seeing, and when we want to enter like the real world that doesn't, what real users need is this continuous usability and better onboarding. And I think there, the progress and the step changes that we're making to think through moving up the stack and not just being stuck into this layer one debate and back and forth, I think is extremely important. And the last part I would say is a commitment to decentralization is extremely important for all the reasons that we know, in particular that it helps build things. It helps all of us have things that are actually more resistant and truer to the vision of why a lot of people actually are in Web3. I would say one of the, on a daily operational point of view, it's a challenge because, as Ilya mentioned, when you're up against centralized entities and things that have a more structured way to go through, it might appear slightly disorganized or more challenging to actually navigate. But nevertheless, for the future of what we're building, we think is actually a very important commitment.
Yeah,
go ahead, David.
Sorry, no, I'm just like, guys, can we just have 1 week where someone's greed doesn't make a headline? I think we're well on our way to it. But at NEA, and this is part of the reason why I was so eager to get involved. I mean, you can see the long-term vision and the fact that it really aligns with the actual promises of Web3, and that's something we're determined to deliver on.
Mariek, I mean, both of you, that was beautifully put, and it sparked a couple questions in my head. I genuinely believe the future is multi-chain. And with that said, what are NEAR's plans for interoperability, seamless interoperability? And you guys already have stuff like the Rainbow Bridge, but on a grander scale, what vision do you have for interoperability between chains and how to drive that?
So there are a few things. I'll mention one, and then if you want to learn more about another, you should come to NEAR Denver, which is March 2nd in Denver, in the venue of East Denver. But so kind of generally speaking, right, as we are working toward more, abstracting out for user what they're interacting with, from a user perspective, right, if they have an account on blockchain, and, assuming that blockchain is very secure, they can use that account to control kind of accounts on other blockchains as well. And so the concept that I kind of called remote accounts. So this is where you can pretty much use, for example, NEAR account to control an account on Ethereum, or even the other way around. And so through that, and there's some bridging behind the scene, there's some relaying, some meta transactions, like a bunch of kind of stack that needs to go into it. But high level is just making it such that when you open an app and you interact with it, it doesn't really matter which chain your account is from and which chain the app is on. Like, it kind of links those things together. And so we have some of the pieces for this. We're building more, and there's an interesting new concept kind of that ties this all together, which is through decentralized composable front ends. And you can learn more about it at NEAR Denver, March 2nd in Denver.
That's so exciting, and I'm glad you had an answer for that, because in the way that you paint it is what I envision for future of interoperability in multi-chain world, is where you don't even recognize what you're interfacing with. You're just interfacing with whatever best fits your need at that time. Cool. So I think those are all my questions. If there's anything that I haven't asked that you guys want to highlight, as far as what excites you most about the roadmap or anything else, go ahead and share with us now. Otherwise, I have one community member that always asks amazing questions, and I was going to let her ask just a high level question or two. And if anyone else has questions, I don't know how much longer the team's going to be here, but you have to DM me your question before I bring you up, or I can ask it for you. But I just want to be cognizant of the team's time.
I think you covered a lot of ground, and your questions were really awesome. So maybe we should hear out the amazing community member that has great questions.
Okay, fantastic. Aisha, the mic is yours, ma'am.
Thanks, Noah. I want to understand how is Near Protocol's nightshade sharding technology providing the balance between scalability and security? And I've read in an article that ensuring interoperability between shards can be a challenge, particularly when it comes to transferring data and assets between shards. Is it true? And how will you be rectifying this issue?
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff written about this, and there's a bunch of videos with deep dives if you want to learn more. But at the high level, so I mentioned there's kind of like from a external observer, Near looks like a single blockchain. Each block is separated into shards, so they are processed by different machines. Each shard has a subset of accounts of the blockchain. Each account is independent, meaning, and each transaction is processed on those accounts independently in parallel, meaning there's no kind of cross account transactions that can happen atomically. So that is how we solve kind of cross chain, cross shard, any kind of communication, because everything is asynchronous and there's like set of guarantees around that and delivery around that. And so all of that then layered directly into consensus. So as blocks are produced and the shards are produced, they are erasure coded and sent around to all the other validators, so that, for the kind of 2x overhead, you have a data availability available, even if the whole shard became malicious and they went offline or trying to produce invalid block. There is data availability to create a so-called challenge and pretty much slash them. And so that is, and then obviously rotating validators and ensuring kind of the likelihood of even like a majority of malicious validator in one shard is extremely low. But the idea is that the chain can withstand even if everyone in that shard is malicious and is able to recover from that. So that's how kind of we balance the scalability, that we can have a lot more shards. The cross contract communication is asynchronous, which allows us to kind of scale and run things in parallel. So like we have kind of this parallelism on account level, which is kind of extremely powerful. And finally, the kind of consensus is leveraged to achieve data availability and process challenges in case something does go wrong.
Understood. And I was wondering, is Near Social designed as builders and developers social network, or web influencers also use Near Social to monetize their content? And as Near Social is also is not limited to Near D apps, anyone can build their own widgets and connect widgets to external ecosystem. I was wondering, how will you make sure all the widgets integrated into Near Social are safe for the users?
That's an amazing question. So Near Social, for those who are not familiar, is a kind of been a prototype of this new technology which we're going to be rolling out at Near Denver. But the idea at the core is ability to create a presentation layer that is fully decentralized and composable. The component, the front end itself, is stored on the blockchain and is composed when you actually accessing it. So when you want to see some specific application or component or like screen, it actually pulls the data directly from blockchain. There's no middleman. There's no single website. There's no kind of like point of failure between you and the blockchain. And so that gives actually a set of security benefits that even like existing websites don't have, right? So Curve was actually hacked, their front end was hacked, and people could have lost a lot of money accessing that. In this case, let's say Curve would use this, they would have like cryptographically authenticated the front end component that's used to access Curve. And to hack it, you would need to like compromise their multisig or their DAO that does upgrades of that front end. And so there's kind of a set of benefits there. And then the other benefit is the components themselves are actually have a level of isolation. They run in a virtual machine. And so you as a user actually have control over what those components can and cannot do. And you actually right now ask permission when they're interacting with blockchain on your behalf to confirm it. And like that all will get better, and there's like ways to improve how that data is shown. But generally speaking, there's like a very kind of robust, although evolving security model that's built in because these components are not kind of directly rendered, but are run in virtual machine as well. So think of it as like we made smart contracts into front ends with near social and this idea of discovery. And so that all, maturing and coming together, we're going to be talking more about it at Near Denver, March 2nd in Denver. And I kind of invite everyone to join there or tune in to learn more.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for answering.
Nifjen, you got a question?
Yes, I do. Hello, everybody. Thank you for this fantastic Twitter space. All the information was great. The question I had is, out of all the different types of verticals, whether they be DeFi, gaming, social fi, and whatnot, which one of those verticals do you think is going to bring on the most users from Web 2 to Web 3, and why?
Well, so gaming traditionally, if you look also since the start of the internet, has always been a place where there is actually a lot of innovation, and there can be breakthrough. Now, I would say in gaming, I think everybody in crypto is waiting for that breakthrough, right? And so what we are observing, and what might be an indication of that, is more like do something to earn type apps. And so, for example, on that, and we could debate whether we consider that part of the gaming category or not. But I think applications like Sweatcoin, for example, are a good indication for first steps and onboarding, because as we've actually discussed in this AMA, I think if we want to get truly to like 1 billion users and mass adoption, then it gets to actually doing things that are simple and that can be transformed from a Web 2 world, but are native Web 3. To earn type application that is extremely interesting. And I think Ilya also mentioned, but it goes again in this like do something type to earn, but there is actually this crowdsourcing type of data mining things, which are like, well, help figure out what this picture is saying and then earn. And I think we are seeing like traction on that, and probably this could be the entry point that then truly get to some of the first couple of millions users, and therefore we'll see traction.
Might I call it work to earn?
Or walk to earn.
It's genius. It's revolutionary. Just to add my 2 cents, Noah, I think, look, if you look in the Web 2 world now, what applications have the most users? Of course, gaming is an incredible one. Social media is absolutely going to end up on chain, I think, particularly when we see so many people being censored in a controversial manner, which people might not necessarily agree with. So that would be that's the red I would bet on.
Perfect. Thank you all for your responses. That was great. And I have to say, I do agree 100%.
Thank you, Nifjen, for the questions. Aisha, thank you so much for the questions as well. I think we have one more community member, Rahmat, and then I'm gonna wrap things up.
Yeah, thank you, Noah. Okay, so I've read in an article on the CoinDesk that Near Foundation is committed to a Web 2.5 approach for bringing more users to the Web 3 rather than creating unique Web 3 applications and projects for the Near ecosystem. So it got me thinking that how is Near Protocol making it easy for especially Web 2 applications like games and social apps or digital financial apps to migrate to Web 3 by seamlessly restructuring their infrastructure?
Yeah, well, one good example of that is actually, so I think, Sweatcoin, for example, would go perfectly in that. So it's an app that has 100 million users and was very Web 2, but then needed to go actually figure out how to go on Web 3, and therefore chose Near for scalability and usability. And so when you actually use the Sweatcoin app, you don't need to actually, as Ilya mentioned, the account ownership and what you can actually do with your account, and the fact that it can actually be managed on your behalf by someone else, means that then it becomes seamless for a user to start having their first wallet and their first tokens, and therefore interact. And so that's, that's how we think about that. But then that concept can actually be translated into games, and actually can be translated also into different social apps and all that. So the key for getting to that point is actually the fact that the account and the creation of account and the maintaining of account and actually the ownership of account is something that is can be created in lots of different fashion and way, but it's also extremely usable. I don't know, Ilya, if you want to add anything on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on a lot of improvements as well to kind of continue toward this vision from infrastructure. Like, again, meta transactions is a great example. Like, you don't want your users to start to get to need to pay gas fees, right? Similarly, we're improving onboarding, kind of even simpler kind of ways to create accounts. And so just really kind of reducing this barrier to entry that exists right now on one side, and then giving these tools to companies as well as ready to make solutions, right? Either with startups or with materials. For example, if you want to launch a loyalty, some form of earn, fly to earn, which is literally what airline loyalty points are, type things. At this point, it's pretty clear how that can be set up, and so you can just give all the either instructions or already ready to use code for folks to build that into their systems. Similarly, there's a set of use cases that are pretty clear now, various low things, various kind of gaming integrations, just ready to go for existing Web 2 use cases to transition to Web 3.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so you talked about this Near Digital Collective. So I was thinking, is it under the influence of the Near Foundation, or it is an independent entity? And how many members are there in the NDC, and how are these members elected?
Yeah, great question. So it's independent. Of course, if the NDC needs help or guidance or anything that the foundation can help with, as with any other project, we can also help support that. At the moment, I think, and you're gonna test me here, but I think there is a group of 10 or 15 very active members, and then there is a broader group that is continuously evolving. We have a place which is a forum. It's called gov.near.org. And actually on that forum, if you're interested, anyone can basically start participating into that group and provide point of view and provide feedback also on, for example, constitution and how things are designed.
Understood. Thank you so much for explaining. Over to you, Noah.
Near team, thank you so much, you all, for being here today. I hope you got half as much as value as we did out of the broadcast. If you have any final words or closing thoughts for our community before you head out today, go ahead and share them now. Otherwise, I'll close things out.
Just to say thank you so much for the community. Go ahead.
No, so, okay. I just need to chill. Yeah, huge thank you, Noah. Huge thank you, everybody who got involved, everybody who's listening, everybody who asked questions. But if I do not do this, then I will be reprimanded. So if you are going to ETH Denver next month or the end of this month, you must come along to Near Day on March 2nd. It's going to be incredible. We're opening up ETH Denver with the first night's opening party. It's going to be amazing. If you want to get involved, head to near.org/Denver. Don't miss it. The events team put so much work. The community are doing incredible side events. It's going to be the second best crypto event of the year until NearCon rolls around later on. So thank you so much, Noah. Everybody, I hope to see you in Denver. If not, we'll be sharing all the information on social media and beyond.
Great. Mariek, I'm not sure if you had anything else left to say. Otherwise, I can shut things down.
No,
here.
Go for it. I can't top that up, so go for it.
Okay, well, thank you so much again to the Near team for coming on today. I know you guys are very busy building, and we really appreciate this educational content. Whale Coin Talk community, thank you so much for being on this broadcast. We're nothing without you guys, and so we really appreciate you coming in every day and listening to the content we put out. Hopefully, you get something that you can walk away with and add to your own crypto journey. But for now, remember, everything you hear on these broadcasts is meant for educational purposes only. Nothing is financial advice. So be safe out there. Take care. My name is Noah, signing out.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.